How old is she?
There we go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to call the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority regular meeting to order at 2 o'clock on January 8th, 2024. For our roll call, we have for Washington, Commissioner Anderson is present. And we have alternate Gilchrist and alternate Wilson will be stepping in for Commissioner Keithler and Commissioner Gibson. In Oregon, we have Commissioner Fox present, Commissioner Polson present, and I believe Commissioner Babbitts and his alternate will not be present. So we do have a quorum. We'll move on to the agenda. Is there any changes or modifications to the agenda? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the meeting minutes as presented.
We can do the meeting minutes too. Is there a second?
Second on that. And I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda.
To vote first. But also, all right, all those in favor of adopting the minutes as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Commissioner Fox has made a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a second on the agenda?
Second.
There's a second. Is all those in favor of adopting the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Public comment. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment for the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority? If you are online, raise your hand. If you're in the room, raise your hand.
He just went from 118 or so. But you want to recognize them and everything.
What? I'm not seeing.
David McCurry.
Is
Just
on.
a member of the public. It's just at the bottom.
Oh,
Yeah, David McCurry had his hand raised.
did he have his hand raised?
I did not, but I am just here to listen.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, for the last chance, is there anyone?
Oh, that's the cursor.
That's just a cursor. The cursor was a hand and it looked like before. Sorry about that.
No, just
Good one, Mike. I didn't see it. Okay, is there anyone who'd like to provide public comment? 9650. Would you like to provide public comment?
That's me, Michael Ryan from Summit.
Okay. All right. We will close public comment if there's no one that would like to provide public comment. We will move on to the executive reports. Commissioner Fox.
None to report.
All right, and I have nothing to report that won't be brought up here shortly. Project Director Bridge Update Report.
All right, on the government affairs, just an update on that. The short sessions are getting ready to start. The Washington session started today. On the 8th, it runs through March 7th. The Oregon session will start February the 5th and run through March 10th. We don't have any major activities on either one of those. But Brad and Katie both will be monitoring those for us. Summit Strategies, as our federal lobbyists have been working on letters of support. They've gotten an Oregon letter of support for the BIP, and they're working on the Washington congressional members letter of support for the BIP. So that should be coming as well. WashDOT funding, you'll see, and we'll talk about it later in the packet, that we're working on the agreement with the with WashDOT for the $5 million state funding of the $15 million that was committed this biennium. Oregon funding, we are still working through and waiting on the Oregon lottery bond sale. That won't happen until 2025. Grant updates. We have heard back on a couple grants. So the Safe Streets for All, we were not successful in obtaining that $1 million Safe Streets for All request. Not too surprising because we have the 3.6 raise grant, which was very similar in scope. So we'll be taking that off under the MPDG, or the multimodal project discretionary grants.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
Yeah.
The infra, we did hear back. I'm sorry, we have not heard back on infra. We should, the crystal ball is telling us right now that we will hear back from that on Wednesday or Thursday, and we're trying to make sure Seth's computer's not gonna blow up.
It's not gonna blow up.
It's happening or something right now, so, the infra, we're expecting to hear back, or at least that it'll go to the Hill, this week. So that's the last of the three mega, MPDG grants. The mega grant, we did hear back, it has not been officially released, so just making a note of that, but the information of where that went to, up to the congressional for their 30-day approval was that we were not part of that. So unless something has happened over the last 30 days that would change that, we have not gotten anything or will not get anything from Mega. We also have heard officially back on rural. We have not gotten anything or will not get anything for our rural application this year. The Bridge Investment Program, the BIP, we do not anticipate to hear that until February, March timeframe. And that would be, again, another one for 200 million. So just recap, infra is the one outstanding one. We expect potentially here late this week, early next week. BIP, we do not expect to hear till February. Both of those are requesting 200 million. Treaty MOAs, Umatilla is in legal review.
Maybe that's our grant.
Yeah. I don't know what that is, to be honest. Spam. Sorry, Umatilla, it's in legal review, so our legal team, Bridge Authority legal team is reviewing that as well as the Fed's review, the legal team. If there's no major comments on that, we will be sending that back to the Umatilla for hopefully moving that forward to signature. But it'll be a big step to get legal review and at least have our legal team sign off on it and help to move that forward. So
Let me talk about that for just a second. Do we need to bring that back to this group with after legal review, but before we take it back to the committee, to the tribe? And if we're in agreement here, then we can state to them, we're ready to sign. It's in your court.
we could do that. Yeah, we could take an interim step to bring that back to the authority, have the authority officially sign off that they're ready for signature.
I think.
And that way we can make that statement. So, okay. And we should be able to do that at our meeting on the 22nd.
That's consistent with the way we're approaching a lot of other things.
Okay.
Get all our hurdles off of the table first, and we agree.
Here it is.
With us.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that then. We'll plan to have that on the January 22nd agenda if we don't, or we should be able to work through any comments legal has too.
Yeah.
We do have an interim meeting with Umatilla on the 16th. So if anything comes out of that would change it, we'll update you at the 22nd meeting. Otherwise, we'll have that as a motion on the 22nd. RFP, we're still progressing through to have a proposals due on the 22nd. We are working through some clarification questions related to mostly contract language. So where we can working with our legal advisor who's writing the contract for the RFP. We're still anticipating 3 firms right now submitting proposals, and those are due on the 22nd of January. Right away, just another activity. We are preparing and pulling that together to prioritize the properties that we anticipate the contractor will need. So we will, over the next month or 2, be bringing that back to the authority to see how we want to move forward with some of those early acquisition parcels. One of those will be the port parcel and relocation of the port. Hopefully through the IGA that's being developed, a lot of that will be covered in that IGA. If it's not, then we will have some secondary actions to take outside of the IGA, but we'll see where the IGA ends up on those. And that's all for that.
Maybe just a clarification point on the IGA. Looking at it on the port side, it was kind of silent on who was going to pay for the relo the office. And there was some concern that we needed to get that written in there. And I mentioned to him, that in our original estimate, the 520, we did have money allocated in there to make the move for them.
Yep.
And I thought, can't speak for the group, but I thought we would honor that. It's in the estimate that way.
And I believe that was always the case. That's
Yeah.
we're operating under.
I think that was everybody's understanding that the relocation would be paid for. Depending on how the IGA gets finalized, we'll have to see what appraisals we'll need and what validation of cost we'll need. So we kind of need to see the language that the lawyers come up with in an agreement on the right of way. And then we can determine the kind of the payment method and how to determine the value once that's done. So.
Okay, let's move on to our legal report.
Sorry, good afternoon, everyone. So Mike has reported on some of my status updates, so that'll shorten it quite a bit. In any event, I wanted to end up with the IGA, so let me just go through some of the other items that were out here. As you will recall, at the last meeting, we reported to the commissioners regarding procurement of municipal advisory services and indicated that it constitutes personal services that the board may directly negotiate and engage a fiduciary of its choosing. And Foster Garvey has, if the board is prepared this evening to move forward, Foster Garvey has actually prepared and drafted a motion for the board to authorize those negotiations, which would set out the findings to support the position that these are personal services that can be directly negotiated. In that regard, Foster Garvey has also begun drafting a master bond declaration. Mike has reported, I guess, very briefly on the right-of-way acquisitions, and Foster Garvey is going to be working with HNTB on those acquisitions. And they've designated one of their partners or principals who apparently has been involved in these matters before, who will be heading that. With respect to the WSBA reimbursement agreement or interagency agreement, as Mike has reported, it is under legal review. Dakotas has taken a look at the agreement. We didn't have any substantive comments. There were a couple of minor comments that were made. They could be accepted or not, and it wouldn't matter from our perspective, but I believe that Foster Garvey is still undertaking a review of that agreement. I don't really anticipate there to be much coming up out of that's substantive. With respect to the IGA, I spoke with Mike late last week after I had been contacted by Bill Ole from the port. And Ole, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a conference call on Friday. Generally, you know, the concern or the issues, and we all agree that the IGA needs to get done. And it needs to get done as quickly as we can get it done. And we had initially drafted a form of IGA from the original, I guess, proposed terms that were drafted sometime or talked about sometime in September. And Foster Garvey had made comments to that particular draft. And then just late last week, we received an updated, I guess I'm going to call it a term sheet, because that's what it's been characterized to me, that there have been terms that have been agreed upon, at least in negotiation between the port and the authority. And I now have that new term sheet. So the idea would be for Dakotas to take the first shot at including in the original draft that we had whatever items may have changed or been added to by virtue of the term sheet that is now in play. And really at the board's direction, how would you want me to proceed? Would you want me to draft and finalize an IGA that incorporates the terms in the last term sheet and share that with the port's attorney, and we'll hash out the legal language. Did you want us to come back or go to the board first for you to review the draft before it's presented to the port? It's really, I just need direction from you.
I would recommend that you work with Bill Oley, take the original draft agreement, incorporate the changes that came out of the quote term sheet wherever necessary. And once both of you feel comfortable with that, you give one copy to the board and take us through it, while Bill takes the other copy through the port through it and see if we can't finalize this thing.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my recommendation. That makes the most sense in order to move this along.
Is there consent from the rest of the board?
Yes.
Okay, you've got consent from the board, Judy.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I don't think I have anything right now that would be an update to whatever else we were working on. I don't think there's anything new that's come up.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Do we have any questions for legal? Not seeing any. Thank you. We will move on to our lobbyist report. And since Washington goes first, we'll have Brad go first. Brad Boswell, are you there?
Yeah, guys, sorry. I was trying to get my screens situated there. So thanks everybody. As was mentioned earlier, Washington is starting today. It will be a 60-day session. It will go very, very quickly. One of the things that I just do want to highlight for folks is that one of the big pressure points going on right now is transportation, and specifically funding for transportation projects. So one of our big efforts this year is to continue to make sure that this bridge project stays as a priority. It certainly is a priority for Senator King. We met with him earlier or late last week. It certainly remains, as I mentioned earlier, one of, if not his top priorities, and he is going to do everything he can to protect the resources that we already have. I bring that up simply because there is going to be enormous pressure on projects. Many of the large mega projects going on in Washington State are seeing significant inflationary pressure to the point of having to do reevaluation. So that's kind of our main mission this year, is to protect what we've got. So I'll kind of stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions or dive deeper if folks want.
So Brad, Mike Fox, question, when you said there's going to be some projects that'll probably go under reevaluation, is there any hope that if we're ready and we show we're ready, we can steal some of their money?
I'm going to take an under promise, over deliver model on that. I'm going to guess that that's probably not what will end up happening. But we are going to do everything we can to be prepared if any scenario like that does occur. I think the biggest project right now that is going under heavy scrutiny is the 520 bridge project up in King County. And that one, that hasn't even gotten, that's in the bid phase right now. And the bids came in about 70% over what their engineers' estimates were. And so those are some of the things that are really causing concerns out there.
So a question for you, if we come up with a innovative way of contracting such that we've got some guarantees by the contractor that they will live within our total project budget, would that not be something we want to share with the legislature?
Yes, we will put another way. If we come up with something like that, we will want to share that with the legislature. Absolutely.
Okay.
So Brad, I have one, this is Eric Wilson, one question about, you had mentioned reevaluation of some projects. Is it possible that some of those high profile projects that are over budget could be taking resources from lesser profile projects?
I think that is part of the conversation that is going to be, in play right now. Yeah. Our job is to make sure that doesn't happen to this project at least. But I want to stress that there is a huge amount of scrutiny. You've got ferry projects that are delayed. You have, again, 2 of the mega projects that are coming in way over budget, as well as just generally, and that's materials inflation, that is labor inflation. That's also a huge function of just the lack of major contractors to do the work. All the contractors who are available for these like big projects are pretty committed, and that's what's driving a lot of these cost pressures. And so to Commissioner Fox's point, if we can lock something in and we have the ability to go and like talk about innovative things and being able to hold the line on costs, that's absolutely something the legislature will be interested in hearing about.
Is there a bureaucracy discussion that some of the contractors are sharing in working with the state and intense urban areas on some of those mega projects as a budget driver?
Well, I mean, I think that everything around these projects is going to go under a microscope. So if I'm interpreting your question right, the bureaucracy is absolutely one, and there's a pretty significant frustration level with both the cost estimation and apparently how they're establishing these engineers' estimates. So again, I think I'm interpreting your question right, but that's absolutely going to be something of scrutiny.
Any other questions for Brad?
Yeah, one quick one, Brad. In your report that you sent, that said that there's an 11 billion backlog in infrastructure projects right now, and I'm taking from your previous comment that part of that is not that it's an unfunded 11 billion; it's that they're actually just waiting for contractors to be available. Funding is part of it, but there's also part of that backlog is funded, but it's just unable to be actioned on because of busy contractors right now. Is that? Am I understanding that correctly?
I think that's a part of it.
Okay.
That was, a number that was given to me or came through the committee structure. So I don't remember the exact breakout of how that $11 billion was structured, but I'm sure that that's a part of it.
Okay. That's better than all of it being unfunded 11 billion.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say from a positive perspective related to that is because of some of these challenges and projects, coming in, they have started to begin early conversations around another revenue package and another, project that's not going to happen this year, but they are going to begin those conversations certainly for next year, which hopefully creates a scenario where we can, continue to engage, especially if we can show significant progress, where we can, go back to the well again in conjunction with another transportation package. That's still early. I don't want to, say that that's for sure going to happen, but that's certainly some of the conversation that's being had right now.
Thank you, Brad. We'll go next to Katie.
Thanks. This week, the legislature is meeting in Salem for interim committee days. In addition to providing updates, the interim committee days are an opportunity for the legislature and committees to daylight concepts for the 24 session. As I reported last time, we don't expect major investments in infrastructure or transportation, but we are monitoring those hearings this week as conversations are ongoing. What I have been working on is the recipient change for the $20 million, which would direct the money from the Port of Hood River directly to the Bridge Authority. So while I'm in the Capitol this week, I'm circling back with the Legislative Revenue Office and the Ways and Means co-chairs, just to make sure that they have everything that they need to make the change. And that change would ultimately happen in an end of session omnibus budget bill. And as you'll remember, the short session is designed for non-controversial issues and minor budget adjustments. So redirecting the recipient fits nicely into both minor fix and non-controversial buckets. So before the holiday season, I did connect with the governor's office regarding speeding up the bond sale. The Transportation Infrastructure Advisor to Governor Brown committed to at least asking the question to see if there are opportunities we can pursue. Again, she flagged that it's probably not likely, but I'm still having conversations. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Katie?
We're working with Katie to look at a loan vehicle through the state. Is that true?
Yeah,
Yeah.
part of that. And Katie, you can add on to this. Part of that is getting the name change. So we've met with the infrastructure bank. There's a possibility of us being able to do a $5 million infrastructure bank loan. It would be kind of backed by the lottery bond sale. And but the thing is whoever's name that's in is who the loan would be with. So we're trying to get the lottery bond name changed and then do the infrastructure bank loan in the authority's name rather than having it in the port's name because the loan is currently in there.
So what Katie is talking about is getting the name changed
Yes.
by the end of the session, which is
March
in March.
7th or yeah.
10th.
Brett said.
And then we would turn right around and go look for the loan vehicle.
Yes.
How long would it take us to get that vehicle in place so if we needed to start drawing down on it?
Yeah, and they thought less than a couple months, right? Katie, was what they thought it would take to be able to get that through the
Yeah,
process.
The first application process seems to be a pretty quick turnaround with under a month, but that's just the initial application process to make sure that the project would qualify. And then there's a little bit larger application, and that takes probably about another month also. As I understand it, it's a fairly fast process.
So we
And-
should be able to access that midsummer.
We think so by June, yeah.
Okay.
That would be the goal.
Yeah, and we can apply for it at any time. And once you start drawing on it, that's when the amount becomes due. Excuse me.
Interesting.
One of the things, and as the session gets started, one of the things we may bring back to you either in late January, early February, is whether you want to go ahead and start the application process. And reason we had paused a little bit was to see what other alternatives there were. Because as soon as you start the process, you will have to reimburse them for any time they spend. So we were going to let this kind of play out a little bit and then come back maybe January, February timeframe to say, hey, do you want us to go ahead and start the application process, knowing you're going to have to pay them to do whatever portions they do.
How much are we talking?
It would be their direct expenses up until you do the loan, and then it's 1%.
And that's administrative fees and their in-house attorneys. As I understand it, it's minimal, but I don't have a number associated with minimal.
I would certainly think we don't want to let it go past the end of February.
Yeah, that's the thought, was that we should know more by then in order to make a decision.
Yeah.
But whatever we have in February, I think we need to make that decision in February.
Any cost we pay for the administrative costs is going to be much less than whatever costs we have associated with the contractor. Can't pay.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Next up, we'll go to Jim.
Thank you. Michael went through a number of the things where we are with the discretionary grant programs, still waiting on infra So as he said, it's supposed to come out later this week, or at least go to the Hill for notification later this week. He also referenced the letters of support for the bridge application. But prior to the holidays, we got the letter from the Oregon senators and Congressman Blumenauer. Just earlier today, we finalized a separate letter from Washington senators, as well as Congressman Newhouse and Congresswoman Glutenkamp Perez. So that if it hasn't gone, that will be going shortly in support of our application there. I think the big news, here, they did get an agreement to be able to hopefully move towards finalizing the FY 2024 appropriations process. Still a lot of unknown pieces to that agreement that they have, but they've at least agreed on the numbers that'll allow the appropriations committees to start finalizing their bills. Hopefully that will occur. There's likely to be a lag where there could be some small partial government shutdowns. We'll have to see how that plays out. That could include transportation. Thankfully, a lot of the money over at DOT is currently funded through advanced appropriations that were included in the IIJA, but there could be some ripple effects for that, and it's obviously not a positive thing. So we'll have to see how that plays itself out. But the real big piece for us in that is if they can get to finalizing the 2024 appropriations bills, then hopefully, and again, we'll have to see how this plays itself out in the end game. The earmarks that we got, the 3 earmarks, will be able to go forward and will be part of that package. We'll have to see, as I said, when they get to this final agreement, how they treat the earmarks. Normally, they just keep all the earmarks whole and they go into the final bill. Depending on how much money that the transportation subcommittee has, there could be something where the individual earmarks have to take a haircut. We'll have to see how that plays itself out. We're very engaged with the delegations on both sides, talking to them about the projects, making sure that those projects remain distinct. They don't somehow look at them and bundle them together because they're all for what they might view as a single project. So we're hopefully we can keep those 3 projects separate and that funding all intact in the final bill. So we'll continue to monitor that as it moves forward. But those are the big pieces here. And again, happy to answer any questions.
So Jim, question for you. If we have to take a haircut on the infra grant, is there a possibility we could make it up on the bill?
No, well, I'm sorry, I may have, the haircut, just the possibility of a haircut would be on the earmarks that were included in the appropriations bills.
Yeah. So so just summarizing those, we had 3. There was 2 $4 million appropriations and 1 $1 million appropriation. So we had the potential for up to 9 million.
Yeah, and just traditionally, the way they've done it since they've reinstated earmarks is they'll look and say, we've got $141 million worth of earmarks in both bills. So we're just going to move that forward, but they may not, depending on what kind of allocation they get under this new budget agreement, they may or may not be able to fully fund that. So maybe it's only 139 million for all the projects. So then they're going to do some kind of across the board. So it'd be, again, it'd be a haircut. It wouldn't be, they wouldn't relitigate projects or pick and choose which projects get funded. So it'd just be kind of a, small across the board. But that, it's premature even to really be raising that. It's just that could be, one of the end game possibilities we're monitoring and, talking to the delegation folks as well as the committee folks about. So hopefully it's something we can avoid altogether. But that's being played well above, the delegation members level, and so it's at the leadership and with the president. So we'll have to see how it plays itself out.
So one last question for you. Let's assume that worst case, and I don't really want to, but we don't get the infrastructure. We're still in the running for the bid.
Yes, sir.
What would you do different to try and influence being success on the bid that we haven't already done?
Well, we need to talk to the delegation to see, if any of them would be willing to make, phone calls over to DOT, to the secretary. It's something we, have to see what they'd be willing to do. That'd be the one thing. Really, we've done the meetings at DOT, we've done the meetings with delegation, we've done the letters of support, it's, just trying to ratchet up that heat, kind of the next level, but, we've done all the blocking and tackling.
Any other questions for Jim? All right, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you for all of our, all the help from our lobbyists. Next up, we are going to have, City of Bingen Mayor Catherine Kiewit give us a presentation. Can we come up here? Yeah, and you're closer to the one of the. Right.
Did you get me?
I did not.
Oh, okay. I sent them right at like airport too.
Oh, okay.
So if you check your email, you might see, or I shared them with you. But if not, I can always just send you.
I got it.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Here. I don't know all of you. What's your name?
Seth.
Seth, hi. Are you with HNT?
No,
Okay,
no.
What's your role?
I'm a commissioner, alternate,
Okay.
So a little background,
Yeah.
Catherine was your predecessor as part of the Tri-State Working Group.
Yeah.
So one reason why we're here is because of her.
And
I'm Ben Berger.
Ben, hi.
Nice to meet you.
Catherine.
Catherine, it's asking me for a verification code.
Oh,
Super fun.
we might tell you.
Well, I got something. Hang on.
Okay.
We're getting there.
It's really not that fancy. I just put it together today, so I can just tell you guys. Am I the first one to come to talk to you guys about this? Okay.
So just let me remind everybody kind of why. So a meeting or two ago, we had asked the local stakeholders, I'll say, to come in and talk to us about opportunities that the different cities or counties or regions might have to work with the contractor to help with some of the housing shortfalls that we see coming up in a couple of years. So we sent an email out to all of them. Mayor Kiewit was one of the first to respond, to offer to come in and talk to us and tell us what opportunities might exist in Bingen. So that's what she's here today, is just to kind of walk us through what those opportunities might be. And then it just gives the authority, the opportunity to share that with our contractor in the future, to just make those connections and allow them then to work with the city of Bingen to maybe come up with something or partner on something. So no real action for us, but just or information for the authority that they can use in the future.
Good job. And I noticed that Paul Rudensky is on this call too, and his son, I believe. So they may chime in if you guys have specific questions, but I just wanted to you can go over to the next slide. Thanks, Amy. If you can.
There we go.
Okay, so Bingen is very small, for those of you who don't know this, and we have not a lot of way to expand and grow. And most of our, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of our residents are low income, and we qualify as disadvantaged when we, seek funding for grants and other opportunities. So that's like a little bit of a backstory on the city itself. And if you go to the next slide. So yes, the request is for 150 to 200 short-term housing opportunities for bridge workers. As you guys know, the housing market here is already really strained. And I reached out to WAGAP and talked to them about any opportunities that they saw in relation to this. And they are just worried about the consequences of bringing in this many people and displacing other people that have, that are trying to live here already. And whether that's increasing in rent or just availability of opportunities. And so when I think about bringing in, an outside contractor that maybe is not familiar with the gorge and their, limitations that we have, I just want that to be something that's very clearly communicated, that this hopefully could be a really positive experience for the community if we're able to build more infrastructure to accommodate the lodging that these people need. But if that ends up not happening, then it could be really detrimental, like for decades, in terms of, people would have to move out of the area. And I definitely don't want that to happen. So those are our concerns. And but we do have a really exciting opportunity coming up, and the timeline actually works really well with the bridge project. And so I wanted to share that with you guys. If you go to the next slide. So the Mackenzie River group is the developer, and they purchased the back portion of the farmland that you can see on the right-hand side. And they are planning a development for long-term housing there. And if you go to the next slide, it will be 80 eventually multifamily units, 22 are 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 44. You guys can just read this, but essentially, yeah, 80 units. This has been an ongoing project. They have been trying to break ground for the last couple of years, and they have not been able to get funding for the construction because costs have gone up so much. And so they've been waiting for construction costs to come down and be more beneficial to them. And so I don't know if whoever we hire, if they're able to partner with them on making this happen, but they have a goal that they need to start construction at the beginning of 2025, regardless of what's happening in the economy, short of an actual depression. So these are the goals that they have set out for when people would be able to rent the units. And obviously the proximity is ideal, like it's very close to where the bridge is going to be. So short commute and all of that stuff.
Would you not want to try and take care of the long-term residents using this first?
Yes.
So how is your plan to do that?
Well, so, I mean, if it doesn't get built at all, then that's a problem. So I guess I would rather, if it's not really me that has a say in any of this, but yes, we would love for it to be used by long-term residents. And the idea in terms of like partnerships would be if they were able to fund, portions of it to get going sooner. I don't know if the timing works for them or the project, but they've got it all done. They've got their permits. They've gotten through all the process. They're really just waiting for interest rates to be more favorable for them.
We've had discussions with a number of the potential bidders during the open period, but we've also talked to the unions. And we got some indication that the unions could perhaps do some of this as well. But I would think going into it, if they're going to put money into it, they want to reserve some of the early spots for the craft.
Right. And I don't know, and I don't know how many of those people are going to be like project managers that are going to be in the through the whole duration versus people that are coming in as specialty contractors doing like some, things. So I don't know, like, I don't know how temporary is, like if it's 3 months versus.
It's probably, I'm going to make an educated guess. It's minimum is 2 years. And some of them will be here pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
And if the 150 to 200 range, not saying that you'd take the entire thing over.
Oh, yeah, no.
But it would be a pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And they could probably take the whole thing over, but I also don't see the craft fully engaging in this because most of them, I believe, will only bring themselves for the work week and then they're going home on the weekend.
Right, yeah, so the one bedrooms are probably preferred,
Yeah.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
it'd be one bedroom.
Well, and, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, one thing that strikes me is sort of something that Bingen might be able to engage in is, and this seems like a very aggressive timeline. I don't know what's involved in beginning construction, but if that's development of roads, you know, sewer facilities as well as the buildings themselves, I'd be impressed to see this happen. But I would imagine, you know, having a discussion with them of with the you know, with whoever gets the contract to help build out infrastructure, but allow them to have temporary units on there to house people while other buildings are being built, because I think that's probably the more likely scenario is that they want it before it's done, but they've put money on the table and they want.
Could you go back to the diagram? You bring up a really interesting idea. Okay, so if you look at the plot plan on the left-hand side, that's all the units at completion.
Right.
I believe most of the construction workers we're talking about are gonna have trailers and RVs.
Very true.
Okay, so if we did this thing, worked with your contractor in two phases, a permanent phase and a temporary phase. And when the temporary is done, most of the infrastructure is already there to go ahead and build the permanent phase. In other words, if you took half of that and you made it into RV parks, you run your utilities to it and you pick which areas you're going to build out permanent up front. You could do that much quicker, get the RV parks going quicker, get some revenue coming off of that to help fund the rest of it. And then at the end of construction, when the RVs leave, you've got 4, 5, 6 years worth of revenue that you could put into
Doesn't
you know,
work
the
in a
permanent
situation-
position.
It doesn't work in a situation like this, though. When they come in, they're gonna be trying to build the whole thing out as quickly as possible.
No,
They have put RV, I mean, when you put power and water in the ground on an RV park, you've gotta be there for 4 years just to pay those costs off.
and I think it will be there for 4 years. Easy 4 years.
Well, and Paul, if you can hear me, you can hop on and, talk about the speed at which you guys can actually move once you've gotten funding. But this is something that they've done multiple places, Bend and Gresham, and so they haven't done one in Bingen before, but this is something that they have experience doing.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. The 12-month time frame doesn't bother me at all. We've done that regularly. We typically push our contractors to do a project this size in 9 months, and I think we would be able to get some of the units available. Last project we did was in Gresham. It was 82 units, and we had 4 buildings. We staggered the buildings, and so the first buildings were ready to be occupied at about 6-month period. You guys bring up a really interesting point. The part right between Jocelyn and where the apartments are, we have an additional 16 units going in there. But the top part, we have a subdivision for 12 single-family houses, which will have all the water and infrastructure in there. And then on the left section where you see parcel 4 and lot 2, that's our second phase. And that would be another opportunity to do something like the trailer systems that you guys were just mentioning. We have never done that before. And so, but like you said, it would just be infrastructure. And I believe a lot of the utilities are already in that, in those sections to the west right there. And so that might be another possibility. We haven't thought about that at all. So I'm just speaking off the top of my head. I think it would be really difficult to break up our whole project and have access in there while we're doing it for trailers, for residential vehicles and stuff like that, when we're also doing all the construction. There'd be safety issues. That would be a stretch. My first reaction is that would be a stretch, but I'm not ready to close the door if people are really interested in exploring that.
Well, I like your idea of the adjacent property. The beauty of that, you were already paid to bring in your heavy equipment.
It's
So
already
the
flat.
mob and the demob, it's really a savings there to go ahead and knock out your infrastructure for an RV park, at least temporarily. I think that's something I think about that a little bit. If you've already got that land and it's relatively flat and you're not looking at a lot of fill or a lot of cut.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
So on the timing, just so everybody, our RFP is due January 22nd. We are anticipating to have the contractor under contract by the end of March. So but I think once they're here, then what we would do is just say, hey, as you prepare for construction, you should probably have talked to Benjamin. They've got some opportunities for you all to partner. And then just turn it over to them to come speak with you or McKinsey or whoever, and just say, you guys go figure out what is best, right? And the authority is really just a matchmaker. We're not going to be in the business of making sure everybody does it however you want, but it's just telling them that, hey, Benjamin has this great opportunity, you should really go talk to them. And then it would be kind of up to you all to figure out what the best deal is. And whether it's, whatever works for the contractor versus what works with your timing. Because we're anticipating our construction to start in October of 25. So they would move people in somewhere in that time frame. So again, that would be where you need to talk to them and say, hey, when do you anticipate moving people in? How many? What's your ramp up? What's your tail off? And you guys could start working on what that looks like. But I think this is a great opportunity for them to come talk to you all and see what could be worked out. And again, we're looking at it as an opportunity that they're going to spend this housing dollar somewhere as part of that, because it's incorporated into that 520, right? We incorporate a thought of how much it's going to cost. So we might as well keep it in these communities and get something out of it when they leave, and not just the bridge. This is an opportunity for an investment that would leave something that would be not only the bridge, but something after the bridge for the regional communities that actually have direct impact, right? So
and we're not looking necessarily that like this solve all 150 people, but if you could solve 40 to 60, that's a pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
And that's 60 people that aren't going after other rental property, and they're going to have probably more money to spend than the locals. So what's going to happen. They'll ratchet up the rent and take it over.
the other thing too is there's a lot of work coming. I mean, IBR just got $600 million. It's not a bad commute from here to Portland. These could be end up being permanent.
I hear you say that on
Right?
Friday.
Hey, well,
So how much does the housing impact factor into who you guys pick? Do they have to pitch how they're gonna solve that? No?
we just know we just know it's coming. Our focus is on the bridge. It's more of just making sure the communities are aware, and for you guys to kind of try to partner with them to make it happen.
I think our concern is we can see that coming. And how do we make sure that our neighbors don't get pushed out?
Yeah.
By those that are building the bridge? We all need the bridge. So something's going to happen. What can we do to minimize that?
And the reason I bring up the other work is you could potentially end up with permanent residents.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other work that could keep people here for another 10, 15 years.
Sure. Will you go to it might be the last slide. So there's one, so there's. So, yes, okay. This is adjacent to the parcel that we were just looking at. So this is actually the part on SR 14. And it's still for sale. There's a commercial property there. We're in the process right now of doing an economic development study for what could go in there. But the property owner, which is Sticky Farms, they were approached about mini storage and they're like, no, but they kind of would like for it to be a hotel, which would be, and it could be. I'm just saying that there is another layer of housing that could potentially come into there that would be more short-term, or they could be like, suites that are sort of kitchenettes and stuff like that for people. So.
SRO kind of arrangement.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so. I'm just throwing that out there again as this is that's another possibility in that same area.
Well, we went down and looked at your port
Yeah,
a while
were
back.
they open to it?
The area that we looked at, we were two different areas. One, if we had a prefab area that we needed, and it looks like you've got a nice space for that with barge access.
Yeah.
The other piece is downriver from in situ. Along the river there's a kind of a wide open field down through there, and we've said maybe that's a place that you could develop into an RV park temporarily to get the people out there, and we suggested that to your guy to think about.
I think the problem with that area is it's actually technically in the floodplain, so you can't
RV
really
float.
compute it well. But if you think about you put infrastructure in and how to use that in the future, and then you're kind of limited to commercial uses, so.
Well, and there
trying to
used to
solve that.
be RV stuff down at the marina. The port had it's probably still there. They had an RV area, which they discontinued a couple decades ago. But when Kiewit Construction was calling about this project, they asked me about housing and who they should talk to about it. And I mentioned the port because they have had, Northwest Natural came and did a huge pipeline thing, and they had a whole area that was their jumping off point for, 6 months or so. So I know that they do rent out their parcels for.
Yeah, the port's actually looking at a piece of land up in the Odell area.
Okay,
And
which port?
starting to.
All right.
Oh, you're talking about.
Sorry, I'm talking about the port of Flickitat. So you guys are looking at an Odell to create housing?
Yeah, but again, it's not gonna solve the problem.
Yeah.
It may solve a piece of the problem.
Yeah.
I don't see one solution to solve this whole thing. I think it's gonna be 3 or 4.
Well, I'll be interested to hear when you get other people coming to you to hear about other things that are options, because my main concern is that, we have this, it is coming, but it isn't enough to solve the whole problem. And it really wasn't meant to solve this problem. It was meant to relieve the pressure that we're already experiencing. And so, I would love to know that there's going to be some other options too.
I would suggest to you is that you talk with your guys about that adjacent property and maybe making a phase there. Think about an minimal RV park, but nice. You don't want just junk out there because they're going to use it for 6 to 8 years potentially. And would that be viable? And start thinking about it, because when we award the contract, I'm guessing the first 3 months, there's going to be lots of discussions about, okay, where are we going to put people? So if you're already ready to talk about it, I think you'll get a jump on it.
So I just want to make sure that they have all their SEPA and all their permits and everything done and in place for this project. All they're waiting on is favorable conditions.
Yeah, from
the city.
Yeah.
Everything's done.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great.
Not for the other parcels that are,
But for for that first set.
yes.
Because even if we have people moving, out of one apartment in White Salmon that's family owned and they're moving down here because it's brand new, that's still opening up in essence new space, and having 80 units, during that time, that's going to be great for both, at least these people, if they know that that's available, they've got the chance to fill a good portion of those without having to steal them from other people and, try to undercut. So there's a lot of possibilities that I see there. So thank you very much for bringing it.
And you've mentioned quite a few times like an RV park. I feel like it would be useful for the city of Bingen to know what these things typically look like. Because I think you'll want to work with I don't know if you have a planning commission or how you set all of that stuff up, but getting your zoning. We're talking to the planning commission, right? But to make sure that,
So what
we're even allowed to build that kind of stuff.
Pretty basic.
Community.
Most of the RVs, all of the RVs have their own plumbing, their own bathrooms, their own showers. So I wouldn't necessarily say you got to build a shower complex.
Right.
But you're going to have to bring utilities, which is sewer, water, power, to a slab of concrete. And I would, instead of just putting it on gravel, I'd spend a little bit of money and put a 25-foot, 30-foot slab of concrete, maybe 10-foot wide on the number of lots, bring utilities, stub it up next to it, you're done. Because again, most of these folks will come in Sunday night and they're going to leave Friday night. And all they're there is to sleep, eat.
So, I mean, because I know you have a lot of experience with this kind of thing. Is it typical that they would, the hiring, like the contractor who you guys hire would do that infrastructure development?
I've seen some projects that will help with that. Yes. It really depends on the local and what the housing situation is.
So
I've
they
seen
like sublet the land for.
I've seen that.
Okay.
I've been on a project where we brought in an ocean liner to a dock and put 10,000 people on. Because there wasn't anything there. The motel had 6 rooms and we had 10,000 people out in the boonies building an LNG plant in Northwest Australia.
So I think the takeaway is it's not a simple problem.
Yeah.
There's going to be many different solutions to resolve it. And the overarching idea is how do we not displace our citizens?
It's going to come fast though.
And yeah, and the thing is it's complicated. So we got to do our thinking now and be ready when the opportunity is going to come somewhat.
I mean,
we got
next
2
week or
years. We got
next
2
year,
years.
yeah, but
We
we
can
made it.
either waste the 2 years and then we got a real problem, or we can be thinking about it now and taking action now. How are we going to solve this proactively? And that's what we're kind of pushing for. Got 2 years. We got to be able to figure this out
We
and create a win-win.
all of the bidders know that this is an issue in the gorge and they're all thinking about it. And they from the private sector are going to go and talk to other people in the private sector and see if they can find a solution that's fast versus going and asking government to come up with a solution that could take longer than their project.
The good news is that one of the contractors has contacted you. So
Right.
I think that's a score. Someone heard something.
What we're gonna end up doing on our phase 2 will be a lump sum contract, right? We're gonna say, hey, you have X amount of money to go build this job. Part of that's gonna be incorporating paying our people to travel or be here or whatever. They're gonna go with what's the most economical for them, right? So it's gonna kind of be, and that's why we don't really want to get in the middle of that, but what can Bingen offer them that makes it financially attractive for them to come help you somehow set you up for something down the road. And that's really what we want to bring to the cities is, hey, you've got the potential for 150 people that need a place. Go see if you can talk to the contractor and come up with something that's financially viable for them that makes it attractive to both of you to get a win-win out of this.
And the last thing is that there's some business development opportunity for small business. If you had an RV park or something like that, and you've got 60 to 100 people, they're going to need lunches every morning. They're going to want to go eat someplace. So it will create, extra income for the community.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Any other?
Soliciting, so as, she goes out and talks to developers or we have developers that are interested, what's the best way for us to get questions and sort of proposals that can then be shared with the contractors or passed on, so that we're kind of consolidating the opportunities for new housing, be it development that will be permanent development, temporary housing, or like hotels and other infrastructure that we may be able to support, either with potential, as a conduit to financing, or where the contractor would sign up to either lease land or back a development for temporary, or commit to rooms or something like that. How are we? What's the best way for us to take that information in or to solicit that?
I would recommend that as we're having these discussions, we create a little notebook. And the notebook is, here's a contact list. Here's some things that the community has thought about. And when the contractor comes on board, one of the introduction things we do is hand this book over to them. And then it's going to be up to them to contact the suppliers and work the deal. But we kind of brought you together.
I mean, my thought would be, we'll keep this presentation, we'll keep whoever you want to be your primary contact and do exactly that. When they get on board, just here's contact person, and here's what they said was available. Go talk to them.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would be curious, just from my own interest, just to hear what when you have other communities coming, whether it's Mosier or River, or just.
Yeah.
I'd love to see like a consolidated.
Well, I mean, these are all public meetings, so we could tell, you could check the agenda, everybody can see who's presenting.
I don't think so.
It's on the second page. It's on there.
Okay. I have to kind of dig through.
That's the problem. It's on the second page.
Okay,
Your name's even on it.
with that, thank you, Mayor. We're gonna move on because we're starting to burn through time. We have the consent agenda. I want to make sure everybody had a chance to review the consent agenda and doesn't want to pull anything for further discussion. Not seeing any, I would entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So move.
There is a first and a second. Discussion.
Nice to see everybody.
Good to see you. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries. Okay, next up, we're gonna move into the engineering report.
I'm going to ask Eric to present the report.
All right. I think we covered a lot of it, so I may be a little bit repetitive. RFP we talked about January 22nd. We expect to see those. If I'm correct, I think today was the last day for any people to bring up any problems or
We may
protests.
have extend that a day or two.
Okay. And so that is moving along, and all of us on the selection committee are spending our time reading the RFP, and it's just riveting.
Is it really?
I
don't think so.
Aesthetics committee is moving along. Invitations have gone out to the different organizations in the Gord. They haven't been invited. We've also had our outreach, and we received roughly 40 applications for our 4 citizen at-large positions. Interesting, 60% of those came from Washington and 40% from Oregon, which I think was a little bit of a
Okay,
surprise.
so you're going to select 60 from Oregon and 40 from.
So we're distilling that list down to 2 from Washington and 2 from Oregon. And we're doing scoring right now, and we have a reconciliation discussion tomorrow midday. So we'll have that going. Our first meeting is supposed to be in January, and I think we may be in jeopardy on that, but we'll get that scheduled here shortly. And I think we already covered the treaty tribes pretty in more detail. The last thing was the R2A2. We finalized that, and I think that's another discussion item. Did I miss anything?
No, the one item that we talked about for the aesthetics committee was to try and put a time frame on it. That their final report is due September 1.
Let's call it recommendations.
September 1, which then gives us several months before the end of the year to,
Yes, that, and we do have a schedule that roughly wraps that up with the meetings through the spring, consolidating those recommendations through the summer, and then submitting that. So
how many members on the team? Total?
I was afraid you were going to ask that. I think there was a list of invitees of roughly 24. We added the 4 tribes on top of that, and then the 4 citizen. It's a large group, yes. Not everybody will be there though, I'm sure, so.
Yeah, based on the 44 applications, I mean, I'm sure some of those people will show up because it'll be public, so.
Yeah.
Even if they're not on the committee, they can still show up to the meetings and have input.
And I think that, a lot of the drive there was to get a little more diversity, a little bit more. I think just looking at what we did receive, there are several individuals that have some disabilities. We did not do, it doesn't appear, although we didn't ask the question, that we have a lot of cultural diversity. All the names are pretty Anglo-Saxon names, not a lot of that. Other than that, oh, and then the other was, I think we only had 2 female applications from Oregon. All the rest were male.
Interesting.
Which I thought was, it's kind of interesting when you kind of lay them out and try to look at what are the different pieces. It's like, why'd that happen? So we're in that process, and we'll have that wrapped up tomorrow, and then start scheduling meetings after that.
Jessica, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think that we've received confirmation from 9 folks so far, from the organizations that we've invited, and Stacy's gonna actually make some calls this week to follow up with everybody who we haven't heard from so far. So we're hoping to wrap up membership of that committee by this week.
Great. Thank you, Jessica.
You bet.
Okay, anything else from engineering, construction? No. Oh, okay, moving on to governance, administration, and operations. Arthur isn't here. So what I would say is we covered most of that during the legal report update. One thing I would say is that Arthur and I's discussion is I think in Washington we will have 2 members are going to get appointed to a 4-year term, 1 to a 2-year term, and then same with the alternates, and then Oregon's going to be the opposite way. And my conversations from my seatmates at the county commissioners is we don't need to go through the whole process again. So I just need to talk to those on the Washington side and figure out who wants to do which terms and how. And so you'll probably be getting a phone call from me later this week, and we'll get at that figured out.
Anything on the co-chairs? Did you and Arthur have any discussions on the co-chairs? We're supposed to appoint co-chairs this month.
Right. So that's why we needed to get this going through the process to get who's going to be appointed.
Okay.
And then we can have that conversation, but.
So that'd be on the 22nd, probably.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll take a little bit longer to get at least through our board. I know Hood River only meets once, but we can still, if we know who's going to get appointed, we can still have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Unfinished business, new business. Action items.
Yes, the first is the agreement with WashDOT for the funding for the state. I sent that out really just to see if there was any comments. If there's no comments, just a kind of an acknowledgement approval from the board to send that back to WashDOT so they can get it to their AG. Our legal has reviewed it. I need to follow up with Mark just to make sure he didn't, but the CODIS looked at it, didn't have any comments. As long as Mark doesn't have any comments, then is everybody okay with us sending that back to WashDOT?
Yes.
Okay.
I've looked at it.
Okay, and that'll put us in, that'll get us the approval for the 5 million in state funds. And it also allows for amendments in the future. So if in different new bienniums, we get additional state funding, we can just amend the dollar amount. We don't have to do a full agreement with them. So it'll be, hopefully that means a little quicker access to the funding.
Okay, next one, move on to the fiduciary advisor.
Yep, I'm gonna turn this over to Mark. He drafted a motion on this and had some discussion about the fiduciary advisor.
Thanks, Michael. So we have had this conversation a couple times now regarding how to engage a financial advisor. And I think this staff is recommending, based on Judy's legal analysis that was presented at the last meeting, as well as the practicalities of the enormous amount of work that's facing your finance team in a short period of time, that you authorize the project director to enter into direct negotiations for financial advisory services with the intent of presenting a contract to the board for approval.
Anybody want to make that motion?
And we drafted some findings basically that recite the state law and the provisions of your governing documents that permit this form of procurement. And so to the extent that we could have those entered into the record as part of the minutes, then I think that that would be helpful if you're ever questioned in the future about how this procurement process was decided upon.
Sure. I'll make the motion. I move that the board authorize the project director to directly negotiate a personal services contract with the financial advisory firm to present the proposal contract to the board for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. At the minutes also show that Nate is now online, so we have a full board. Thank you, Nate, for being able to log in. I know you're on vacation or doing something fun. Hopefully. Okay, memo for the intergovernmental agreement.
We actually did this when legal came up.
So
took direction
we just
to,
already, okay.
Yeah, we're good with that.
So we
already.
don't need a motion though?
Well, we probably should do a formal motion.
Yeah.
Kind of took a vote, but let's do the motion.
Yeah, would anyone like to make a motion directing legal counsel to move forward with drafting the IGA based on the terms defined in the memo?
So moved. Make the motion as stated.
Whoever raises their hand first gets it. There we go. Mike gets it.
Eric and second.
And Eric will second. All right, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, informational items.
So one of the informational items, our fee schedule, we've already talked about. The second one is we do need the board to adopt a schedule for the meetings for this year. We had previously talked about and have been using 2 to 4 on Mondays. There was some discussion about that. So I don't know if we want to take it up as a motion this meeting or we want to put it on the agenda, but I just want to bring it up for discussion that I would recommend by the 22nd that we make a decision on how we want to move forward with our meetings for the rest of the year.
I know Marla had brought up at one point a discussion item about making them a little more accessible for the community. 2 to 4 on a Monday is kind of tough for a lot of people. I guess I'll just echo that sentiment. I, for one, would prefer not to be meeting in the afternoons and evening, but I think as a new public entity, there's some of that we should consider when we set that time.
I agree with the sentiment. It's just difficult given the other obligations and other affairs that people sit in that are not movable to accommodate this group.
Right, especially when you have so many public servants already sitting on it as well, that makes it even more difficult. I would say, if this was pre-Zoom world, I would have a lot more of that understanding, but considering that all these meetings are Zoom, anyone can email their comments. I mean, the public's whole, being able to show up is a 3-minute comment. And you can see how many comments we're getting. So apparently we haven't done anything wrong yet. Yeah, Jake, you have a comment?
I'm here. I don't know.
Good to see you, sir. What I found though is that 2 to 4 on these Mondays is apparently worked really well considering we've been able to get a quorum and there's a lot of boards I sit on that's really hard to get a quorum. Does this work still for everyone this year? And the other conversation we were talking about is at some point going to once a meeting, or once a month meetings.
I think we're a little early
For that, I think I would agree with that as well.
Hold my breath. Yeah.
So with that, maybe you could drop something for the consent agenda for next.
Yep.
For 2 weeks from now.
We'll do.
Okay.
But until we change it,
We're gonna, the next 3 or 4 are scheduled for this time.
Yeah.
And they. All right, the next information items, I'm gonna turn over to Debbie, to talk to you about the budget stuff that's coming up and finance stuff that's coming up, given that we're gonna be in our second year.
Yeah, so the toll revenue report was the next one that was on the list, and that's all just kind of being in line with where we expect it to be. So I don't really have any additional comments on that. It just it's for your information, and if you have questions, let me know. But everything is pretty much falling in line where I expected it to be and where I budgeted it. So for it, at least on the port side, since the Bridge Authority doesn't have a budget at this point. But I of course had to make an estimate because at some point when the IGA is done, then that money will get transferred to my expectation is that the money will get transferred to the Bridge Authority. And I'm allocating interest to it so you can kind of see how it's growing. As far as budget process, so it's always difficult. One of the interesting things with this group when I'm working with financial advisors and attorneys and this and that and everybody that I work with is that there's still this overlap of the port and the Bridge Authority. So currently, as of today, the Bridge Authority doesn't have any money. I always hate to be so blatant about it, but as of today, you don't have any money. And so everything is still being handled by the port and it's in the port budget and all of that. Moving forward, we are anticipating that you will have money. And so therefore you will need a budget. And so I'm moving forward with the idea that the IGA is going to be in place. So hopefully you'll be getting able to borrow some money. Hopefully these grants will either get transferred and or the new ones will be in your name. So moving forward, you will need to have a legally adopted budget. The budget process in Oregon was geared a lot towards entities that get property taxes, and you don't get property taxes. So there's a large chunk of Oregon budget law that's really not going to apply to you because it's really focused on entities that get property taxes. So it does simplify your process some, but I do believe, and I don't want to throw Mark Greeno under the bus, but I am going to work with him to make sure that we do have all the ducks in a row for getting this moving forward. But I do believe that you are going to need a budget committee, which under Oregon definition is the governing board. So it would be the 6 actual appointed official members, and then an equal number of citizen members. And so given that there's no real definition anywhere in Oregon law about this, my assumption is that you would pick 3 additional citizen members from Washington and 3 additional citizen members from Oregon. Oregon does have a provision that if you can't find people that want to serve, then you don't have to. You just have to make sure that you document that you've really tried to find budget committee members. And if you don't get them, then you just document that and move forward. I attached a kind of a generic draft budget calendar. You have to have a legally adopted budget in order to function on July 1st. Given that you won't have any expenditures probably on July 1st, then you're going to be okay, but we're going to stick with that budget calendar so that you have something in place by July 1st.
So a couple of questions. And we really appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, it's what I do.
Yeah. We've got a budget funding finance committee.
Mm-hmm.
Could we we still have the parent organization, if you will. Could we declare that's our quote budget committee with final approval being the 6 commissioners?
Not under Oregon law, the way it's written now, because it specifically says it's the budget committee
Right.
is the 6, it does say elected officials, so that's where it throws me a little bit too. It does say it's the 6, or it says it's the elected governing body, and then an equal number of citizen members. So even though you're not on the finance and funding committee, you would be on the budget committee.
Well, I get that.
By
Where I was coming from is if we used our alternates.
You could use
we
them as your
get
public.
3 and 3 already.
Yes, right. And you can do that. Yes. So you can have I believe, and again, I want Mark's final blessing on this before we actually move forward saying that. But I believe that you can use your 6 appointed officials and then the 6 appointed alternates. I think that because either way, however you do it, you will have to pass a resolution saying these are our budget committee members.
Sure.
And so where they come from.
So one of my thoughts is if we find out that our alternates, because they can serve in our places, can't be on the budget committee, well, we've got 40 names that aren't going to be appointed to the committee, and you've already verified them. Can we pull off 6 people off of there? Be like, sorry, we didn't pick you for the aesthetics committee, but don't you want to do budget?
So there's a lot of options for finding people, and so
Yeah, we just want to make sure.
Question is that this is a 1-year budget.
Right.
So for us, when we step back and look at it, our 1-year budget primarily is going to be HNTB, the progressive design build contractor, legal, and lobbyists.
Yes.
And we're only looking at a 1-year slice.
It's 1 year.
Whereas a project, we're looking all the way out.
Right.
So you take the overall budget, you do a cash flow on it, and you squeeze it down to this. This is what we're talking about, is this piece of it.
Right. How much of the project is going to get done between July 1 of 2024 and June 30 of 2025?
Right.
And that's what you have to budget for. But you don't have to budget. So here's the other piece though, and this is where it always gets interesting when I'm talking again to various people, is that you don't have to budget the part that the port still has to pay for. So those grants that are in the port's name that the port will be paying for, you don't budget that part in your budget because that's already going to be in the port's budget.
I disagree with that.
No, it's
time out. Hear me out. The input to the port for that piece that is theoretically controlled by this project, we ought to be telling you, this is what we need, and it's funded from those particular grants that are in the port's name. We're still responsible for the scope, the schedule, and the expenditures of that work. So if we're budgeting all of our known work for the year, a piece of this gets extracted and moved over to the port budget, theoretically, as the piece that the port is supporting with grants for this, but it's under the port's name, right?
But under Oregon budget law, those are not your expenditures.
I understand that. How you get it, what I'm after, I want to make sure we're responsible for telling you, as part of your budget input, here's what we need in this project. It's our responsibility.
And that can be information that flows into the port's budget. Yes. It's still, the port has to budget those expenditures because they are port expenditures.
Don't disagree.
Yeah. And so under Oregon budget law, I think is much simpler in that respect, as far as what you legally have to do. You can add on to it and you can make recommendations and do all those things, or strongly recommend, or however you want to word your recommendation to the port. But the port has to budget the expenditures.
No, I get that.
And the bridge authority has to budget the expenditures that they're making.
And I get that. What I'm trying to do is, this is a brand new organization. We need to do some muscle training for the long term. So we might as well start it out right up front. and make sure when we're looking at it, we're looking at the entire chunk. And then a piece of this gets extracted from ours and input over to you.
Maybe a different way of saying that would be, is there anything preventing us from also including, as maybe a separate section of our budgeting process, the money that the port will pay out in their budget?
So that could be, I mean, as far as like a budget document goes, that could be like an appendix. Because what Oregon wants is your appropriations, which means that you're spending that money, that is an expenditure of your organization. So you can't really include that in your budget as far as what Oregon's looking at, but you could certainly include it as like an.
We could have a full budgeting process that's the whole project, and then a formal budget, and then a supporting piece that is the port's piece.
Cities, a lot of times, so in Oregon, you can budget for 2 years, but most places still budget for 1. And so what cities do a lot of time is include their CIP. They'll have a capital improvement plan that goes out like 5 years or sometimes even longer. They'll include that, and they'll include that in their budget, but they're not actually appropriating that because you only appropriate for 1 year at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But I see us maybe in 2 years that when we do a budget, a yearly budget, there's a window and then there's a total. Because our budget, our project is 520.
Right.
We need to recognize 520, and out of that, here's what we expect for this year, of which this chunk of it is coming from the port.
Right. And so you can include that as the CIP piece of it. Like I'm saying, it recognizes the whole project, but it's not part of what you appropriate.
But I think we as a group need to understand how to do that. So we're prepared when the port's no longer in charge of grants. We're ready to go. We're already thinking that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Luckily, most of us do that every year. And so we've already seen it. And I see where you're coming from, but we just have to meet the intent of that. And we have our own budget that we've already got our own budget and we're already doing that. This is just the legal appropriation. So
that might be something that's worth having a conversation at the first budget meeting, is the difference between a engineer's mindset when you say budget on a project and what you have to have versus I call it political budget to the state of Oregon.
They're a little different.
They are different.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And thank you for all your help with it.
Yeah.
One thing. All the property tax revenue. Yeah, we don't have to.
I know you don't have to worry about any of that. So it does simplify it quite a bit.
One other question: what makes them an expenditure of the Bridge Authority? Like if they have, what I'm thinking is the PDB contract will be in their name. The PDB will be sending in invoices prior to.
And you're bringing up the reason that they'll only actually call Judy, because the port right now is paying out money on contracts that the port's not a party to.
Yes.
And so we're having that discussion now. That's why we're really pushing to get the IGA done, because it's going to, I think, clarify a lot of this, that it makes it okay for the port to be paying stuff that we don't have a contract with the vendor that we're paying. And so really what it comes down to, the way that we've been looking at it is that it's an expenditure of if it's a legal responsibility for the port to pay it, basically. If we've entered into, and sometimes it's verbal agreements, but usually it's a written agreement with someone, then that's an expenditure of the port. The thing that we have to be careful with is that to throw yet another layer on top of all of this is that not only do you have the project budget, so you've got your 520 million, you've got your annual budget, which is whatever that ends up being for the set part of time. You've also got a budget for every single grant.
Yeah.
And that's where I've been concerned about the port paying for these expenditures where they don't have a contract, but we're asking for grant reimbursement from grants that are in the port's name.
Right.
And so that's where it's like, let's get this IGA in place so that everybody's bases are covered and we're all good.
Okay. That's kind of what I wanted to, yeah, that's fine.
You were trying to get me to say, we need this IGA, because I keep bugging him about it. That's why he wants me to say it to you guys, because I'm bugging Mike about it.
Well, and it's that, but it's also it helps to clean up a lot of things.
Yes,
We can
exactly.
Get this done, that are kind of hanging out there in gray land right now.
Yeah, we want to get out of the gray and
Well,
Yeah.
I think where we are, and I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus, but I think the two teams have got all of the key ingredients. Now it's with the lawyers to make sure that it gets documented appropriately.
Yes.
And then it comes back to us and we sign it and life is good again.
Yep. I think so too. I think we're in pretty good shape. So that's what I had, unless you need me to comment on anything.
I just had one clarifying question for the non-commissioners on the budget committee. I just want to make sure that it could be our alternates, or if it has to be general public advertised.
I don't believe that it has to be general public advertising, but again, I need to go back to that, and I need to work with legal to make sure that we do have some time here, because you are a more simplified budget. We do have some time to get this done too, so we're gonna, but I'm gonna be talking to Mark.
That was the only thing.
One other clarification. I personally see Mike's team is the arms and legs of pulling the data together. You're the team that's making sure, it fits, it smells and feels right. And then you're overseeing to make sure that we're not screwing something up.
Right, that sounds like a pretty delegation of duties.
Scratch and sniff budget.
You notice. Got one more?
Yeah, the last thing on
Getting harder and harder. I keep trying.
All right, back to it.
one more, the last informational item, we will be taking this to the governance committee to review, but just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of it. And it's just some cleanup of the procurement and contracting policies related to the RFP. So the goal is to get that to the governance committee for their meeting, I think on the 22nd, and get that back to the board for February 12th to just make a ratification of that policy thing. So that's it.
Okay. Anything on the upcoming action items you want to discuss?
No.
Okay. We've had our presentation. Anything from any members, roundtable, anybody would like to bring up? Jake, your hand's still raised. Are you just letting us still know you're there, or is there something you'd like to bring up? All right. Catherine, let the record show Catherine was here as well. She was just a little late. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, not hearing anything else, and we don't have any executive session. Would like the record know our next day meeting is Monday, January 22nd, 2024, from 2 to 4 here. And with that, if nobody has any objections, I would adjourn the meeting. All right, the meeting has been adjourned. Thank you all for tuning in to all of our